Welcome back.
We're back. I feel like we're crushing consistency at the podcast lately.
You know what they say about consistency?
It is the only thing that matters.
It's all there is.
That's all there is.
Joy is consistency.
Yeah. I was talking with my athletes on a deep dive today, and I was reminiscing that like whenever I did sports in high school, because I'm like, despite every like this, I know what we're doing here, and I know that I'm professionally a coach and an elite ultra runner, but like I'm not a very gifted athletic individual. Like, I mean,
Okay.
you've seen me move, like getting in and out of a car.
Yeah.
I mean, it just looks like a squid falling out of a tin can. It is not good. And so every time I ever did sports in high school, like whenever I would like go to tennis camp or golf camp or whatever, like camp I was doing, I always got like the most improved award. Cause it was like, well,
Hey, you've got
she
a lot of
definitely
potential.
showed up.
Yeah.
She definitely was here.
You're good at trying hard.
I'm very good at trying hard. I'm actually trying to, I mean, you don't want to over try, but better, it's always better to be great at being consistent than to try to be consistently great. So that is what I have to say about that.
I love it.
We're off to a great start.
So here we are, the fourth week in April.
Fourth
podcast.
Earth Day. Happy Earth Day.
Excellent. Happy Earth Day to you.
Yep. Celebrate by telling your elected officials to not sell our public lands.
Gosh.
It's my 10 cents.
All right. Well, now that we've gotten that out of our systems. That's the only Earth Day guidance you're going to get from me, a professional environmental journalist. Run on the trails.
The rest you will have to Google on your own.
Run on the trails today.
Yep. Touch grass.
Appreciate it.
So we've got some hot or nots, and then I'm really pumped about this episode because I went through a bunch of studies that we've TJ and I have talked about, or, things that I've been like, oh, we should really talk about how this might have implications for how we coach people, or actually this is like one of those actual studies that changes things a little bit, or like reiterates the importance of something we already know. And all of that is to say, we're going to discuss what I think are the 5 most interesting running studies of the past year. So These are peer-reviewed studies published in scientific journals of good repute that I think are interesting and also important. It's not just like, loss of toenails tied to having red hair, like things that I think are worth knowing about, which, I mean, the whole point of this podcast is things I think are worth knowing about. But a lot of times, as we discussed on our evidence-based coaching podcast, a splashy study can come out and it's like, well, what does this actually mean for like amateur endurance runners? Or like, well, look at the sample size, like there's not a single woman in it. Or like, well, what about like, XYZ? And so I think all of these had really cool sample sizes and have actually interesting implications. So I can't wait to unfortunately burp, because I just took a giant swig of kombucha, to burp and Zoe explain some science to you today.
No, these are cool. I think that there's a lot of good takeaways for athletes here. So stick around. We've got 5 of them, and each one is equally as important as the other. So you'll want to listen in. But let's get warmed up. I haven't, I had a relaxed day. I only had to do 1 call. So I'm not feeling as ready to talk as you are. So these hot or nots are going to be a good opportunity for me.
Yeah, I feel like my baseline is always just ready to talk.
Yes, you're highly caffeinated and ready to engage.
As it said on all of my childhood report cards, highly verbal.
Highly verbal. And on mine, very quiet. All right. Hot or not, Fuelin app. What is Fuelin app?
You don't know? Do you have athletes using this?
No.
So it's an app that is purported to help athletes. Like, it basically is supposed to be like your dietitian in a pocket. And it's like, what activity you're doing, here's how much you should eat. So I think that's a decent idea in principle, but Kylie, our registered dietitian nutritionist, and I have actually done some like deep dives into it and some research, and we've found, and like other experts have vetted this app and uncovered that it pretty significantly underestimates athletes' energy expenditure.
Not great.
So it was originally developed for triathletes, but we're seeing that it probably is not giving very accurate recommendations. Particularly, that's troubling because it's on the side of underfueling, which is extremely dangerous and troubling. And so I totally understand the desire to try to, like, you know, outsource your nutrition thinking to an app, but unfortunately the technology and the AI just isn't there. Also, and this is a petty bad reason to not like it, but when you download it and you also use Training Peaks, it makes your Training Peaks activities look fucking bananas. Um,
Oh, does
as a
it like
coach,
upload a bunch of different files to Training Peaks? So
it's in
annoying.
the activity. There's like, it puts like 300 words. Also, just like as like my default way of being, I don't love getting into my coaching and then like being hit in the face with like calorie numbers. Like that's not my happy place.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, even if they were accurate calorie numbers, I that's just like not a thing I love. But also knowing that they are not accurate, if I could just like get people to not use this app, just don't. Like, if you want to do this stuff right, do it right. We're not like, the tech isn't there. I love the idea of this sort of knowledge becoming more accessible and lowering the barrier to entry, but I'm very concerned about this specific app that is so consistently underestimating athletes' energy expenditure.
I would also say, you know what? Like, save your money for a couple months and support a dietitian and get that level of specificity and individualization for you based on, you know, your actual activity level. And, you know, you can use an app like Chronometer to scan some barcodes and track your serving sizes if you want to see what
Yeah.
your inputs are. Um, I don't know. I really want to support other small business owners and practitioners.
Well,
So,
also just human fucking beings.
yeah,
Like, I love small businesses. I'm also sympathetic to like people have, you know, financial constraints, and like I hear you, and those concerns are extremely real. There just isn't a good replacement for humans yet. You're going to try to save some, you know, money on the front end, and you know, Google how much an MRI costs out of pocket in Colorado, and that, you know, appointment with Kylie starts to feel like a pretty good ROI.
couldn't agree more, honestly. Okay. Practicing bonking, hot or
Do
not?
you hear have you ever done this, first of all?
No.
Great.
But I did hear actually on the Swap podcast,
Oh,
David and Megan interviewed Jim Walmsley.
mm-hmm.
So it was I think a couple years back
Okay.
when Jim was living in France.
So is this pre-high carb, Jim?
It could be. I don't want to say something that's incorrect here.
Okay.
I'll just say what I remember, which was that Jim was explaining that sometimes when he trains with Francois Dehane, who is also another amazing ultra runner, that they sometimes play a game of who can go longest without fueling in a run, or if they can take an hour off fueling in a run and like to see how they feel. And
That is so stressful to hear.
yeah, and I guess that's as close as I've heard to athletes doing this. I have heard of athletes, you know, obviously we've seen this a lot in our coaching, people just not fueling some of their early morning runs because they're not hungry, and then they kind of validate that for themselves by saying like, well, that's going to help with my, you know, ability to metabolize fat better. And well, that's just not true.
Yeah.
So I think that this kind of stuff is pretty unhot and also really, really dangerous. We know from the studies that 2 days of underfueling can improve your fat metabolism, but that only lasts for up to 48 hours. And then your ability to burn fat actually is reduced significantly afterwards. So you go below your baseline.
Also,
so not helpful.
With the caveat that your fucking bones aren't able to remodel. And especially in female, like men do have, like with men, like scientifically, there's not, the science doesn't support an advantage in terms of restricting carbohydrates or energy intake at all. But the risks are less for men. For women, the risks are significant, and I don't believe can be overstated.
Yeah.
For women, even just a deficit of a couple hundred calories as a within day energy deficiency measurably increases your injury risk, measurably decreases your bone remodeling markers. Even if it's not like, you could theoretically be meeting your energy needs, so like the number of calories, but if you're not meeting your carbohydrate needs, injury risk increases and bone remodeling decreases. And that's, again, just like a few grams of carbs. And so that is very dangerous. And I just always get so heartbroken because I've had athletes be like, oh yeah, like my high school cross country coach had us like train practicing bonking. The idea being you run in a fasted state, you outrun the energy that you have intentionally to experience what it feels like bonked or in an energy deficit, with the hope that if and when that happens on race day, you'll be like, I've been here before, or
I
you'll be more
mean,
efficient at it. And scientifically, no, you won't. You won't be more efficient at it. And B, good luck fucking making it to race day. And C, you don't need to practice bonking in training, because if you just practice fueling, then you can actually fuel in your race and then you won't bonk.
exactly. And if you practice good fueling principles in your training, you know, you won't have to put yourself in a position where you are under fueling in a race.
Yeah.
And
And
needing to be good at running while bonking. I mean, that's
running under fueled does not make you more efficient at running under fueled. That is not how science works.
I think it just leads to just having a terrible time out there.
Yeah, if anything, like what it does is it, I guess, like, just to devil's advocate, it would make you know what it feels like to be bonked. And that's like literally the only benefit. Like, there is no evidence that practicing bonking has any performance benefits on any level. And there are so many recorded instances of the downsides of it. So, like, this is I feel like we're hearing it less and less, particularly the conversation around high carb, but every so often I do still hear it. So, practicing bonking, hard no for me. Man, I feel like I'm coming in so grumpy.
You're hot today. You're going for it. You're warmed up.
Give me one. Oh my gosh, these are like almost all nutrition ones. This is someone's made a huge mistake.
Hot or not? The carnivore diet.
Not hot.
What's the carnivore diet? Explain this to our people.
So this is when you only eat like red meat or just meat.
Oh, no vegetables?
No vegetables.
No carbohydrates?
The idea here,
protein only.
I did do a deep dive on this, and there's only one peer-reviewed article examining the carnivore diet at all. And it is totally reliant on self-reported data. So, like,
Perfect,
at no
very
point
accurate.
did a researcher touch a living human person. They touched surveys. So, big caveat there. And it didn't actually, like, there were no, like, cited performance benefits. So this is something, like, I have seen, like, in the world of track and field, particularly men promoting this. It seems to be much more popular with men, saying it helps them feel less inflamed and recover better. And again, there's no actual research on the carnivore diet, especially not with fucking women. But the paleo diet, there is some research that suggests that people might feel, or like paleo, keto, like these low carb, high fat, high protein diets, sometimes when people make the switch to a new diet, they might in the short term actually feel pretty good. Particularly if they maybe had a food sensitivity that wasn't identified, and when they in the short term remove that food sensitivity, they might be like, oh, I actually feel pretty great, because they're like not eating, you know, a FODMAP or something that maybe they had an unidentified sensitivity to. But again, there is no demonstrated performance benefit from the paleo diet's not even a real diet, but the keto diet.
I just don't know why any athlete, any runner, any endurance athlete would gravitate towards a carnivore diet, because if without carbohydrates on board, every workout is going to feel so flat. Every run is going to feel miserable.
Yeah, you're going to have a bad time.
And I have athletes talk to me all the time like, oh, I felt a little flat today. I didn't feel so peppy. My first thought is like, well, how'd you do with your carbohydrate intake between this workout and your last workout? Mm-hmm. Did you just have a long run yesterday, which makes it a little bit more difficult to replenish all those glycogen stores beforehand? Oh, you know, that makes a lot of sense why you might feel flat. Like, you need to have those carbs on board. They play a huge role in running economy.
Yeah, because like when you're running, like, you are burning fat. You're burning both as fuel all the time, right? It's just like what percentage. The harder and longer you run, you're tapping into more of those carbohydrate glycogen stores. If you're running slower, easier, shorter, yeah, you're burning fat, because that's a slower burning fuel source, right? If you think about lighting the wick of a candle on fire versus trying to melt the wax, that's what we're thinking about here.
Right.
And when we're running, I want that fucking wick to go up in flames. I'm not trying to just, like, you know, melt some candle wax. So,
well, you do. And that's where the theory of high carb comes in. You know,
exactly.
If you replenish those carbohydrates throughout, you can run at a higher percentage of your threshold pace, or you can run closer to your aerobic threshold pace for longer. So protein doesn't help you do that. Fat doesn't help you do that.
So yes, carnivore diet, not hot. Paleo diet, not hot. Keto diet, at least we have research on it, but also not hot, and definitely for female athletes, extremely not hot. Your diet should be individualized. The most well-researched diet for health, longevity, and athletic performance is like the Mediterranean diet, which is like not a diet.
Tasty.
Very tasty.
Pasta, olive oil.
Just like good ass food.
Vegetables.
And a rich and like diversified diet. You know?
Very balanced.
Really emphasizing whole foods, but also, you know, variety and having fun, and like having not an overly restrictive mindset is time and time again shown to be much more beneficial for performance. So I would, because I'm a glutton for punishment, like to see some studies about the carnivore diet, because I think it's fascinating that, like, to me it just seems like so. I know. Exactly. I'm like, they didn't ask in the survey that was in the study I cited if it was all men, if all the men in the study had pooped. But I do have questions.
In what, the last month?
Yeah, I have questions about
the last year.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of constipated, grumpy old guys.
Yeah. It's like, I remember, I can't remember which comedian it was, used to have a joke about how, like, the bathrooms at the Mad Men office must have just sounded like a haunted house. That's what the carnivore diet's like. Haunted house bathroom.
All right. Let's talk about electrolytes. LMNT electrolytes. Hot or not?
So, I'm going to say my favorite thing, which is it depends. So the best amount of electrolytes for you is the best amount of electrolytes for you. And that may or may not be the really high end of things, like the 1,000 milligrams of sodium present in element electrolytes. Ideally you do a fluid loss test, you do a sweat test, and we aim to replenish 70 to 90% of that. So if you're losing 1,000 milligrams of sodium in an hour or over that, like, yeah, element's going to be pretty hot. But in terms of electrolytes, more isn't better. Like, just throwing more electrolyte at it is not helpful. Like, getting more salt than you need doesn't help recovery. It's just like up to a certain, people always make the same like mistaken assumption with vitamins. Like, oh, well, if 1 serving of vitamin C is good, then 3 servings must be great. And it's like, no, you just have expensive urine now. But there can be, you can like not feel that great if you're getting in too much sodium, and it can definitely cause GI distress if you're using it in your run. So if element has the appropriate amount of sodium for you, then that is awesome. If it does not, then use a different one, because there are 1 million. I also, and this is like, I'm going to put my Your Diet Sucks hat on, I really hate their advertising, which they call it sugar-free energy, which is not how anything works. Electrolytes aren't energy. Yes, electrolytes are vital in terms of the metabolism required to process and burn carbohydrates. Like, if you're, a lot of times when I have an athlete struggling with their fueling strategy, it's like, actually, your hydration might be the issue, because if your hydration and sodium levels are off, that's going to make the whole system not work so well. But like, electrolytes in and of themselves do not provide energy. So sugar-free energy, it's kind of an oxymoron. The majority of energy is going to be some sort of like simple carbohydrate, aka a sugar. So I hate people fear-mongering around the word sugar. Sugar is energy. Electrolytes aren't energy, but they are good and important. And we can talk about these things separately.
They're integral to the process.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, if you're not getting the right amount of electrolytes for you, you're not going to perform up to your best. Your endurance capabilities are going to be limited. Get that sweat test done.
Get that sweat test done.
That's the only way that you can really for sure know. I've had athletes who were thinking like, I'm getting sick, I must not be getting in enough electrolytes. So they go to that more is better mentality. And honestly, like, a lot of people who do get sick, it is because they're not getting enough electrolytes. But in some cases, in the case of this athlete, like, the sodium concentration of their sweat was extremely low.
Yeah.
And so every time they just did more electrolytes, they got sicker and sicker. And until they did the test, they didn't realize, like, oh, I'm actually like on the other end of the spectrum, losing like 100 milligrams of sodium an hour. So like, you basically can't eat any electrolytes, can't drink any electrolytes.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and it's, that could be people who are listening to
Yeah.
this. So you will never know until you really get that test done.
Yeah, the symptoms for having too much and not enough electrolytes are almost identical. I assume because God has a sick sense of humor and doesn't like ultra runners.
He definitely thinks we're out of our
We're
minds.
silly.
We should spend our Sundays somewhere else.
So, do anything else.
All right. Lastly here, let's kind of tidy this up quickly because I feel like we could really get into the weeds on this one.
Ooh.
Fancy running brands like Bandit or Satisfy, hot or not? I'm just going to straight say not hot, but let's get your perspective.
I compare and contrast. You own like 3 pairs of running shorts total.
I have a lot of very old running shorts.
You do.
I do. I have not bought a new pair of running shorts in years.
A climate hero.
They still work. Why buy a new pair?
It's true. I like outfits.
Right.
It's so tough. I like cute outfits.
And so you gravitate towards brands like Bandit and Satisfy.
Well, so Satisfy doesn't make women's clothing. Thank God, because I would probably be very susceptible. Bandit does, and I have unfortunately acquired a non-zero number of crop tops that have matching shorts. Despite the fact that I know this about myself, lavender is my favorite color, but whenever I buy clothes in lavender, I feel like I always end up looking like lesbian Grimace. It's like not maybe my like ideal clothing palette.
You own a lot of things that are basically the color of the shirt you're wearing right now for our YouTube listeners and viewers out there.
So I'm split because like there is a part of me, I like outfits. I like people innovating and making running gear look good, because like when I first started running, it was just like Brooks and New Balance stuff that was all like hideous neon colors and like wildly unflattering. Like all of it looked like it was made by a toddler out of a trash bag. And I feel like we've almost swung too far in the other direction where like now everything looks like it's from the year, like from Blade Runner, and has cell phone pockets everywhere.
Well, you gotta have your phone on you. What if your boss calls when you're on your run?
So true. Straight to voicemail, motherfuckers.
Listen, I think
you are my boss. What do I do if you call on my run?
I don't, because I respect your boundaries.
Thank you.
So, my take on this is get the gear that works for you. And sometimes it might be expensive. Other times you might just wear the same pair of running shorts for the last 7 years, and that's totally fine. But I don't know. I'm not like one of those people who really feels like it's part of my identity to show up in a certain brand. Like I was a professional athlete for over a decade. I know what it's like to like have to wear certain brands gear and to also have to have like those multiple new kits every season for the photo shoots, and you got to be in that new stuff. And I, because that's what they need for their marketing. And I'm like, I ended up having like closets full of that I just gave away to people because it's not sustainable. It's not good for the environment to just put out stuff like that. I think a brand that is worth spending some money on, that makes high quality stuff and that will be fashionable year after year, is Patagonia.
Yes.
Like their stuff is very timeless. That's kind of where I gravitate if I'm going to make a spend on gear.
Yeah.
But some of this is really just like, like I see Satisfy or Bandit and I'm like, okay, this is a brand that's trying to make a statement. They want to have stuff that like people kind of like begin to adopt into their identity or their way of being. Like as an athlete, I wear this. And so that's how I have to show up into the world. I would like to offer a different perspective into that. Like you're an athlete because you go out and train and because you care about your sport. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. If it makes you feel good, like in your body and all of that,
feel
like
sexy, feel cute.
I love that. But at the same time, I don't know, if that's where you want to spend your money, hey, well, who am I to judge?
One of the better things I've ever written, I'll link to it in the show notes, is I wrote a long form feature for Outside Magazine about the rise of indie running brands, tracing the fact that when running went mainstream, increasingly really like runners who identified as like core runners wanted to communicate that they were like, we've been here the whole time, like before the pandemic. And so that's when these indie brands, also like direct to consumer, the running boom, A lot of different technological shifts also encourage this, but there's a lot of reasons that right now indie running brands are thriving. I think small businesses are cool. I think innovation is cool. I think that relying on capitalism to signal your identity is not cool. So it's a real mixed bag for me.
And it's tough. I think it really is tough in our culture. Like if you just hop on Instagram explore page, how many, things are going to pop up with people doing fashion stuff.
Yeah.
Toting like new things all the time.
This is like so petty, but whenever I see a woman wearing like a matching kit, I'm like, I have to beat her. Because
it's a lot of wasted energy thinking about stuff.
I never
like
even like match my socks. So I'm just like Hot Mess Express trying to like chase down all the Lululemon moms.
Wear what you like, but I would say, a lot of this stuff is expensive. Ask yourself, if those expenditures, if the way you use your money is a reflection of your values at their deepest level. And if that is for you a reflection of your values,
my value is
go
crop
for
top.
It. Yeah, mine is not. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I have other values.
I'm still wearing those dirty Microcosm shirts from.
Oh yeah,
those collars are bad.
They're
so bad
TJ has
right
these
now.
white Microcosm shirts, and because he runs in dusty areas, I guess this is our hypothesis. Dust gets on his face. He sweats it off. So the collar of all of his white team shirts look like someone was beheaded in the shirt.
There is that one. What race was that? Western States, where there must have been some red dirt out there.
Yes.
The whole collar is like pink.
Yeah.
Now
it looked gnarly. We were all like, is he bleeding? What's happening? He was fine, just covered
healthier.
in dirt.
I was very iced.
Very iced.
All right, let's get into these studies. There's a lot to cover here, but it'll be worth your while. So let's start out with the first one. This is maybe a biased opinion on mine, but I think my favorite of these. So study number 1, structured plans reduce injury risk by 76%. That is a huge number.
That is awesome. So this is from the Garmin Run Safe Running Health Study. The authors are Nielsen R.O. et al., published in the Journal of Orthopedic and Sports Physical Therapy. Here you have over 7,000 recreational runners using Garmin data and self-reported training structure. So big sample size. Love that. Self-reported training structure, less so, but
it's a little,
I would be like,
great.
It's not the most ideal, but it's a pretty big sample size, and it also does use Garmin data. So that in combination with self-reported.
And we know Garmin is so accurate, especially that wrist heart rate.
I mean, but over the course of that's not what it was looking at. It was primarily looking at macro trends. So
I'm just
in
messing
that
with you.
regard, it's accurate enough.
So why does this matter?
So I think this matters because it provides real world evidence that training structure matters. Runners who followed a written or coached training plan were significantly less likely to get injured.
70% less likely.
76%.
That's a huge number.
That's a huge number.
Just winging it, going by feel, going by how your body feels today, no plan in mind, no destination you're aiming for. Those are pretty problematic things. Honestly, there are a lot of reasons why athletes end up hiring a coach because those things don't produce the results that they want.
Correct. So this found that unstructured runners were far more likely to experience running related injuries. And it found that injury risk, somewhat obviously was increased with spikes in volume, missed recovery days, and inconsistent intensity, which just for us, I feel like is the trifecta of dumb, dumb, dumb.
Yeah, that's not great.
Huge swings in volume, not resting, and being like, oh shit, I should do some speed workouts now. Oops, there goes my hammy.
So, structured plans, obviously there's a lot more consistency. There's more consistency in adaptation. I think especially when it comes to the musculoskeletal system. So having those down periods, those deload periods, rest days at regular intervals, they all kind of create these nice buffers against injury. And so that structure, whether you're looking at it in terms of how we're periodizing the training and the kind of progressive overload we're using, or if we're looking at it in terms of the consistency of opportunity for rest and, musculoskeletal adaptation, all of that just really makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And so I think one of the things that was fascinating is that even when overall training load stayed the same, so two runners that maybe had the same amount of volume, either defined in miles or time in a certain amount of time, even if on paper the load was the same, the distribution mattered more than the load. So it's not just like, oh, 40 miles is 40 miles in the course of a training week. How you structure those 40 miles is absolutely essential and the most predictive of injury risk.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Okay. Any other implications for athletes, or how is this useful?
Yeah, so let's just define what structured training is quickly. So that's a plan that includes progression, variety like intervals, recovery runs, long runs, and rest, not just running when you feel like it. This is like, I understand a balance between structure and vibes, but time and time again, the evidence shows that, quote unquote, listening to your body to the detriment of structure, like a good structured training plan should absolutely take into account how you feel.
Yeah,
like
100%.
If I have an athlete that's like, I feel tired, I'm not going to say your body is stupid, do what I fucking said. No, like
Right.
I adapt the structure to be in conversation with the athlete's body. However, only ever running based on how you feel is not shown in the research to be good for either adaptation or injury prevention. In fact, the opposite. So,
gosh, if I was going to run only when I feel like it,
I would
miss a lot.
Way too much.
You would run all the time, and I would miss a lot of days.
Yeah. Coaching for insane people of all types.
Yeah.
Coaching apps or even DIY spreadsheets were all seen to help with this, as long as you follow a logical progression. So I think like my takeaway for amateur and recreational runners would be, you don't need to run more, you need to run smarter. Sticking to a plan, even and especially a flexible one, can dramatically reduce your injury risk while running. I also think this is most useful for new runners or runners returning from injury who benefit from that structure. I'd also say that folks who are juggling a busy life need a plan to help manage their effort and recovery.
Yeah, I couldn't say more about that, honestly. Like, it's just so key. A lot of athletes just get in over their heads with the fact that they don't realize that the stress they're taking on in training is becoming unproductive. They're not quite aware yet of how much the stress in their lives impacts the amount of stress that they can handle in training. And so if you don't have a good structure that can handle those ebbs and flows, and you're kind of putting yourself automatically in a pool where the likelihood of injury is much greater. So that's pretty tough. And so, gosh, I mean, even just sitting down yourself, taking some information that you've gotten from this podcast or other great ones that are out there, and writing out like a 3-week plan at a time and trying to stick with it, and looking at like hard days hard, easy days easy. How often am I recovering? Am I getting a rest day in every week? Like, just doing that rather than just like, today I feel like this, I'll do this. Today I feel like that, I'll do that. The benefit even of that is significant according to this study. So you don't necessarily need to have a coach, although we're always going to advocate for that. You can do this on your own. But if you don't have something in front of you to follow, you're going to put yourself in a challenging situation.
Yep. All right, let's talk about our second study.
Yes.
And this one, the headline here is that low intensity training predicts faster marathon times. So the actual specific title of the study is the training intensity distribution of marathon runners across performance levels. And this appeared in the Journal of Sports Medicine in 2024. And this, love the sample size, looked at over 120,000 marathon training logs from Strava users.
Great.
Love that. So I think, whenever we look at something like Strava users, it's worth acknowledging that that is a self-select group that is going to skew the data in ways that are worth talking about, right? Strava users tend to be slightly more serious runners than someone consistent who's not going to download an app on their phone. So bearing that in mind, I think, again, this is a high enough quality study. And that's not just me saying that. All the peers who reviewed this for the Journal of Sports Medicine, a well-reputed journal, also agree. So I think this is worth talking about because it's one of the largest ever studies on real-world training data. And it validates a long-standing coaching principle that in order to race fast, you need to train slow.
I can't
a lot.
just pause, hit that little 10-second rewind button, and listen to that over and over again. Because at this point, I'm sure Zoe and I have coached, I don't know, 800 people between us. Something ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've had well over 1,000, 1,500 athletes go through Microcosm in the last 7 or 8 years. I mean, we've gotten to see a lot of this at a, like, where the rubber meets the road, you know, like at the ground level. People struggle with this so hard.
It's the number one thing.
So hard. So pause that, rewind it, ingrain that in your mind. You can't go too slow on your easy days to get faster. It is so important. We'll talk about kind of the breakdown of that, like intensity versus easy running. But the key findings here are that top performing runners trained more overall, but this was done at lower intensities.
Yep.
And runners with a high proportion of training at easy effort, so below your aerobic threshold, zone 2 and below, ran significantly faster marathons overall.
Yeah.
So that's a really, really key finding here.
Yeah. And just to like put some more raw numbers on it, the fastest 5%, so that top 5%, had over 80% of their weekly mileage in the low intensity zone. So, you know, we always talk about the 80-20 principle. At minimum, 80% of your training should be below aerobic threshold. 20% or less can be above that zone. Like, yes, we do want to do some speed work, but the number one mistake runners make time and time again is training. They're not necessarily going hard on their easy days. They're just going a little too moderate. And like, I mean, how many marathoners have you seen? I mean, I can't tell you the amount of, like, this is one of the reasons we've really started implementing threshold tests. I've had a non-zero number of clients will train for a marathon. They'll run their and I'll be like, let's like continue to work on running our easy day slower. And they're like, no, this feels easy. And I'm like, okay, cool. I trust you. They go and run their marathon and it's at a slower pace than their easy days. And I'm like, God, no, that's not how it works.
Right.
You have to run slower than your race pace.
Yeah.
God damn it. You got to do it.
So training at high intensities, intervals, tempo runs, obviously this is still part of everybody's training. It should be. It's part of a balanced approach to training. We'll talk a little bit more about how that balance looks in another study, but you know, that time should really only make up 10% probably or less. You know, I think that 80-20 rule for most folks is kind of more like 90-10.
Or 85-15.
Yeah, like it's just a lot more easy running. And by easy running, we don't mean moderate running. We mean truly easy running and getting really familiar with what easy feels like.
And it like truly is like the number one mental jujitsu move that runners need to make us, because like I every time I work the client, I'm like, you have to slow down. They're like, no, I don't believe it. This feels too slow. It's too easy.
I can't go slower.
I can't go slower. You can, and you must. That is what you have to do. That is not the only thing. That is the number one thing you have to do. Trust us. Run slower. Run easier. I've like literally only told an athlete, like, I think you can push more on easy days, like once in my career ever.
So let's just define for the folks out there what low intensity is. So that's an effort that, again, zone 2 and below. So below the first ventilatory threshold or below aerobic threshold. And that's really where the line is drawn. Like if 80% of your training isn't that easy, you're not going to get the benefits of easy running. And the adaptations that you get when you're running easy lend much better to endurance events like the marathon and even events like 5K and 10K.
Mm-hmm.
You really need to have a big aerobic engine to do well at pretty much like all race distances. So if you're not running that easy, it will be a game changer for you to start to adapt this approach.
Yep. Everyone, take that to heart, memorize it, tattoo it on your forehead.
All right. Training intensity distribution. Study number 3 and VO2 max improvements.
I feel like they're getting progressively more complicated.
That's good though. You know, we're easing people in.
That's right. We're warmed up
and
now.
now we're going deep.
So the actual title is Which Training Intensity Distribution Intervention Will Produce the Greatest Improvements in Maximal Oxygen Uptake and Time Trial Performances and Endurance Athletes, a systematic review and network meta-analysis. This one was published in 2025. So pumped on that.
Nice. This is really recent.
Yeah. So this one is important because it's a comprehensive review that analyzes different studies. So a meta-analysis is an analysis of other studies, which love. And the goal was to determine how different TID or training intensity distribution models, specifically polarized and pyramidal, affect VO2 max and time trial performance. So this meta-analysis provides nuanced insights into how training intensity distribution should be tailored based on an athlete's performance level. So TID or training intensity distribution describes how an athlete divides their training across different effort zones. So easy, moderate, hard. Most of the time, that breaks down into one of two models, polarized or pyramidal. And in a polarized model, about 80% of your training is done at very easy, and the remaining 20% is at that high intensity, like intervals and sprints, with almost no time spent at those moderate intensities. In contrast, a pyramidal model still prioritizes easy running, but includes more moderate intensity efforts like tempo or steady state runs, and only a small percentage of high intensity work. So, research suggests that competitive or elite athletes tend to respond better to polarized training, while recreational runners saw greater gains using that pyramidal approach. And the takeaway isn't that more is always better when it comes to hard efforts, but it's about how you structure the mix of easy, steady, and hard days that really matters. And that structure should match your fitness level and goals. And again, as a coach, I really like this study because I coach recreational runners. Like, yeah, a couple elites and like a pro, but like the majority of folks I'm working with, I want to see data that makes sense for them and that like is about them.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think it kind of helps us to understand the importance of that distribution of stress across the week. So what we were talking about in the previous couple studies, how do we reduce our risk for injury? Well, we have to have a structure and a plan in place that hits these specific energy systems, has rest, has we're working on specific systems, we're going to a specific destination in mind, and we're not just winging it. And then the other piece is just like when you have this approach, it's much either approach, but just understanding these two concepts, you can start to understand, well, how does 80% of my training actually become easy? Where do I put that into a week of training?
Correct.
Which approach do I use to address that? So I think that, when you have this kind of data, it really kind of gives you like a framework to then start to work with an athlete based on their experience level, their history, or put together a plan for yourself if you're one of those self-coached athletes.
Yep. I kind of like the almost like the progression of these studies, because it's like step 1, have a plan. Step 2, make sure that plan includes lots of easy running. Step 3, think about some less easy running as a part of that plan that has mostly easy running. So let's talk about some of the key findings from this study. And it found that those with higher performance levels, so elite and pro athletes, experienced greater VO2 max improvements with a polarized TID, which emphasizes that higher volume of low intensity training combined with some high intensity work. So again, elites are going to be more likely to sustain that higher volume overall, and so are going to respond to training slightly differently. Like potentially they don't need as much stimulus in that like steady state threshold zone, and really functioning on that, like doing like a ton of really, really easy days and then revving the engine in just a few key places tends to be helpful for VO2 max development, with the caveat that VO2 max development isn't the end all be all of like all running ambition.
So. No, but when you work on VO2 max, you work on all the other systems too.
Correct.
So you're not just, you might think you're working on VO2 max in isolation, but you're also working on pulling up your lactate threshold piss.
Yep. So with recreational athletes, they saw more significant VO2 max gains with a pyramidal TID, characterized by a large base of low intensity training, a moderate amount of threshold training, and a small proportion of high intensity work. And the effectiveness of a TID model is primarily influenced by the athlete's performance level, suggesting that training programs should be customized, which is an incredible takeaway because, duh. Thanks, science.
Right.
So let's talk about the implications for athletes. Adopting a polarized TID might lead to superior VO2 max improvements. Structuring training with approximately 80% low intensity, 0 to 10% moderate, and then 15 to 20 or 15 to 20% high intensity could be helpful for those more competitive athletes. And for recreational folks on that pyramidal TID, focusing on a gradual increase of training intensity. So structuring training with approximately 70 to 80% low intensity, 10 to 20% moderate, and 5 to 10 high intensity. And making sure to tailor training intensity distribution based on individual performance is the best way to optimize VO2 max improvements and overall endurance performance. I think another little delicious caveat I would like to drop in here is this is one of the 1 bajillion reasons you should not do whatever random thing your favorite YouTuber is doing for their workout. Because, duh.
Right.
Science.
You are not the same person as that influencer.
No.
Sorry, you should be on your own plan.
Yeah, you should.
We have the same coach, have very different plans.
Very different plans.
You ran more than me last week.
That's true.
And you know what? It's awesome.
I've got that low intensity dialed, baby. I'm queen of recovery now.
Oh gosh.
I do have an anomalously good ability to recover and sustain high volume training.
Yes. And us fast twitch people, boy, we struggle to recover.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, it hurts.
It must be hard.
I can barely get out of bed in the morning.
Bless his heart.
Oh, but you know what? Consistency.
Study number 4. Durability improves with long, low-intensity runs. So the study title is that durability in recreational runners, effects of 90-minute low-intensity exercise on running speed at lactate threshold, studied in the European Journal of Applied Physiology in January.
So this matters a lot because as endurance athletes, we want to prevent that slowdown, that like second half of the race slowdown, that last third of the race slowdown. We talked about that in a recent podcast. Go back and check that episode out. So durability refers to how well your body resists that slowdown and basically what causes slowdown, fatigue. So it's really important, and it's cool that this study shows that even recreational runners can improve their durability and lactate threshold without intensity. So just by running longer and easier, you're going to become more durable. So we can do a lot with easy running. Oh my gosh, man, that probably takes a lot of pressure off of some people who are out there listening, trying to figure out how the hell do I structure intervals? I'm self-coached. I have no clue.
Step 1, write it down on a piece of paper and then do that.
But you can just run easy. Oh my gosh. And you're going to improve. So that's really cool.
Yeah. So some key findings here were that a single 90-minute low intensity run shifted the lactate threshold upward the next day. And that means that athletes could run faster at a lower perceived effort. And that performance degradation with fatigue was reduced after prolonged low intensity training. And this held steady across both sexes. So that was very cool to see in the data.
So lactate threshold, how do we define that? You guys have been listening to this podcast for a while. You already know this, right?
I just assume, it could be someone's very first time. And I want to define.
Let's get it out there.
I would love that, anytime we have a new person drop in, they don't feel like, oh my God, I don't know what lactate threshold is, and they yeet out.
No. I'm happy to put it back out there.
Words.
It's awesome. So this is the intensity at which lactate begins to accumulate faster than it can be cleared. Often associated with tempo like paces, RPE 8-9 if you're on that 1 to 10 RPE scale, or like zone 3 into zone 4. So low intensity runs make your body better at clearing lactate. So you don't necessarily need to run hard or do a lot of tempo runs to improve this competency and the adaptations there that we need.
Yeah. And for amateurs, even just once a week, an easy long run can make you more fatigue resistant and shift your lactate curve. And the caveat I would drop into this study is this isn't permission to not do intensity and to not do lactate threshold. it's permission to understand that your long run serves multiple functions, even when it is very slow.
So obviously really, really useful for our trail and ultra runners, marathoners, kind of our longer distance athletes. If you've got time in your schedule and you can throw in that extra 90-minute run and it's nice and easy, but zone 2 or below, that's going to help you out a lot.
And if you're an ultra runner not currently doing a long run, God have mercy on your soul. Quickly, because the battery on my laptop is about to die. Study number 5, strength training improves running economy. So this looks at the effects of strength training on your running economy in well-trained distance runners, a systematic review and meta-analysis. We love systematic reviews and we love meta-analyses. So this was published in March of 2024. And this meta-analysis of high-quality trials tested how strength training impacts running economy, which is a key performance metric, especially in longer runs.
Nice. So what are implications for athletes?
That running economy is how efficient you are and how much energy you burn to maintain a given pace. And that strength work enhances neuromuscular coordination, tendon stiffness, and force production, all of which support smoother, more efficient running. So for amateurs, even really basic strength routines like squats, lunges, deadlifts, planks, twice a week can have measurable effects over 6 to 12 weeks. I'm always banging the drum for strength training. You should do it. It should support your running. That is all about that. So I would say that, like, yeah, this is your permission to, again, like, just going and doing random CrossFit or like lifting heavy in the gym without rhyme or reason. That's not going to be helpful. But people that are worried that strength training is going to make them slow, well, no, good strength training shouldn't. It does improve your running economy. And if you are an athlete, which if you've made it to the end of this podcast, yes, you're an endurance athlete.
Yeah, endurance listener.
You're an endurance listener. Welcome. You found your people. Integrate strength training. It doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be fancy.
Man. So thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed these 5 key studies. We found these really interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of great takeaways for athletes. If you've got a question, you want to get into something deep around your training, we'd love to hear from you. microcosmcoaching@gmail.com. And you can check us out on the web, microcosm-coaching.com. We'll see you next week.